Hey scholars, welcome back to chapter 6.2, what factors influence the size of human populations. So we're going to look at what are the factors that kind of have negative and positive effects on either growth or decrease of a population. And the first thing we're going to look at is this equation that's coming up, probably going to be on chapter 6 quiz, just giving you a shout out there. Population change. Births is the same word as fertility, deaths equals mortality, and migration tends to have things moving back and forth, either to and fro. So population change, again, I'm going to repeat this equation again, equals births plus immigration. So number of people born plus the one coming into the country minus the ones that are dying or leaving the country through emigration. So that's you don't need to know that equation. That'd be a good one to know right now. The crude birth rate. This is the number of births per 1,000 people in a population for a given year. And vice versa, the crude death rate is number of deaths per 1,000 people in a population for a given year. So that's just the crude rate based on a specific number like 1,000. So it's just kind of giving you some stats there, and those are some extra information for you. This is a really interesting thing. Looks at global, the world's most 10 populous countries. This is back in 2008, so it's a little bit dated, almost 5 years old or whatever. But China, obviously, still there, and they predict by China still being the most populous country by 2025. India is second with 1.1 billion in 2008, and they still predict that to be second, really close, catching up by a fraction, but almost catching up to China by 2025. Then the next the next highest is the United States, and it's not. It's way less than the top two. So those top two, China and India, two of the most overpopulated, cramped countries you can possibly imagine. And the United States is nowhere near that size as far as population goes. And the rest, Indonesia, close, Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria. Just looking at, there's a huge gap between the top two and the rest of the world as far as countries goes in population. So that's all we're gonna talk about. India and China a lot. When we look at populations, we're going to discuss those and have some core case studies based off of those throughout this chapter. Women having fewer babies, but not few enough to stabilize the world's population. So actually, our fertility rate has gone down overall in the past 50 years or so. We call this couple of terms here: the replacement level fertility rate. And when you replace somebody, you're replacing the things that were before you. So the replacement level fertility rate should be equal to, drumroll, 2, right? One for you and one for your wife, or vice versa. 2 to replace you when you die. That's what we call replacement level fertility. Right now, the total fertility rate, or the TFR, for the United States is around 2 point something, 2.1. It kind of fluctuates every year. 2.1 and 2.4. So we are slightly growing, very slowly. For the United States. But there's other places that the total fertility rate, like Nigeria or Niger, I can't remember one of the two, it's like 9. Like literally, that's the average births per it's crazy. 9. That's kind of scary. There has been a drop in TFR in the United States in the past years, and there's a couple of reasons for that, which has helped our rate of population slow. What still have caused us to increase in population is really our immigration. The immigration coming into the country that has slowed too, but that is still causing our U.S. population to rise. It has increased fourfold since 1900s because of our opportunity in this country, mostly because of immigration, but also because of births, because of the Industrial Revolution and war times. It's still growing faster than any other developed country because of our opportunities in the United States and our opportunities for wealth and power. And that's why people are moving here from other countries, as well as education, to get educated and then go back to their countries. But changes in lifestyle in the United States during the 20th century, we have a lot of changes. We're going to take a look at those throughout the course of this chapter. You can see the TFR rates between 1917 and 2008. It's almost 100 years of TFR rates. And you can kind of see, back in the 1920s, birth rates were pretty high, 3.0, 1, 3.02, 3.03, so 3.3 kids per family, that's the average. It did go down by the 1940s, and again, that probably was because of the Depression back in that day. So down to 2, went to actually replacement level fertility. Then the baby boom, the war happened, and we wanted to have lots of kids, so that baby boom jumped up to about 3.6, 3.7 as far as TFR. And that's where you have a lot of kids born during that time. Then it went down again, kind of a baby bust really, and went down even below replacement level fertility rate back in the 70s and almost in the 80s. Eventually kind of stabilized as far as up in 2010, and we're back to about a little bit over replacement level fertility rate. About 2.1 is usually where we're at. So growing very, very slowly right now. Let's take a look at kind of what's happened as far as birth rates looking. If you look at this is birth per 1,000 population. So this is the crude birth rate, kind of looking back in these dates. It's quite a bit per 1,000. So 30 children per 1,000 people in the United States back during that demographic transition, kind of where we were just getting into the Industrial Revolution, kind of starting some things there. Then we had the Depression occur, and that really dropped our fertility down quite a bit. Then we had the end of World War I, where all the people came home. Yay, let's have some babies. Baby boom occurred about 1950 to 1960. Lots of children born then. Still not as much as when we were kind of starting off. We needed those children in order to have people to work the farms and develop the country. Also, we had our baby bust, which went way below there, about from 60, 62, 64, I guess I should say, all the way to about 77. And then we had the echo baby boom, which kind of brought us up a little bit, about replacement level fertility rate again. This is kind of cool. I like this chart as it talks about the major change that took place in the U.S. between 1900 and 2000, within a 100-year period. You can see that just the differences and where we were then and now. 100 years ago, we were at the life expectancy was 47. You only lived to be 40. The average was 47 years of age. Now we're at 30 years increase on that. 77 years old is the average. It's crazy. Married women working outside of the home, only 8% of what actually worked outside the home. Now it's 81%. So huge jumps in there. High school graduates, 15%. Imagine that back in the day. Now we're at almost 83% graduation rate throughout the country. This is a scary one. Homes with flush toilets, 10% back in the day, which is, I'm kind of living where I'm at, to 98% today. Still, there's 2%. I feel kind of sorry for those guys. Homes with electricity, 2%, and now we have about 99% have electricity at the homes. Living in the burbs, 10%. Now we have almost over half the population lives in the suburbs, and you can see the different hourly wages there. $3 an hour to now $15 an hour. This is adjusted for inflation, but it's kind of crazy to look there. Even this is kind of scary. Homicides per 100,000 people, 1.2. Now it's increased to 5.8. And maybe is that because we are living in closer proximity to one another? Is there more competition for resources or jobs or whatever? It's more stresses. Who knows? But that's kind of an interesting stat as well. All right. So several factors affect birth rates and fertility rates, and these are some interesting ones to note. Obviously, children being a part of the labor force have affected birth rates. The more, in areas that need children to run farms and do things, they're going to have a higher birth rate there. The cost of raising and educating children, depending on that cost, could you want to have more kids? I mean, I don't know what your parents probably stress them out right now is trying to find money for colleges. And that's a high price. So maybe we're not having as many kids because we're trying to only send a few to college. Availability of private and public pensions. So looking at retirement, that availability also has how many children you would have. You don't get any retirement. Maybe you want to have more kids, so that way those kids can provide for you later. Who knows? If you don't have any retirement. Urbanization is attributed to birth rates and fertility rates, as well as education of employment opportunities for women. The more women are educated, we see that the less children they have, and the less the birth rate goes up. So those are a few factors there. Also, infant mortality rate. With better medicines and better health care, our infant mortality rate goes down, which is a good thing as far as babies surviving. Average age of women of that birth of first child, they say the earlier women have children, the more children they're tending to have. Availability of legal abortions, obviously that would have an impact on birth rates, and the availability of reliable birth control methods. The more available we make those, maybe the less births that we see actually come full circle. Also, religious beliefs, traditions, and cultural norms have huge effects on whether or not children are born, or they use those last two methods I just talked about. All right. Several factors affect death rates as well. Life expectancy. We saw that in that first stat has grown by 30 years in the past 100 years, which is crazy. Infant mortality rate, just to define this, is the number of infants out of 1,000 who die before their first birthday. And the reason why people are living longer, we have fewer infants dying, is because we've had better increased food supply because of monoculturing and distribution, better nutrition, medical advances, and improved sanitation. Those four have done wonders for our health as far as human beings go in the United States and other developed countries. Other things, that U.S. infant mortality rate is actually still high, though. You wouldn't think it'd be very high at all, but it actually is still pretty high. A lot of times because inadequate care for poor women during their pregnancy and their infants, and also drug addiction among pregnant women. A lot of times we see the people who are pregnant most often are poor and not doing so well as far as addiction goes as well. There's also a higher birth rate among teenagers in this country too, which is kind of scary since we preach it so many times in the school systems, between abstinence and safe sex. So we still have high birth rate among teenagers, which is another factor attributing to it. It's because they say young moms are usually not as wise moms. And as on average, we see more infant mortality with teenage moms than we do a little bit older moms. Migration affects areas' population. Obviously, with economic improvement comes people wanting to migrate or immigrate into your country. Religious freedoms, it's kind of why we started the United States, or how we founded the United States on. Political freedoms, wars, and environmental refugees, like back in the tsunami of 2004 it was, with the Asian tsunami. We had many refugees coming here. We even had refugees from, this is from state to state, but from Louisiana when the Hurricane Katrina hit, moving upwards towards the northern states. So that's just state to state, but country-wise, people would flee to the United States or other developed nations for protection and safety for all these different reasons. The case that we talk about is the United States, a nation of immigrants, and we surely are. We're a very big melting pot for a lot of different cultures, which is kind of a cool thing. I enjoy living here in the United States, that's for sure, and appreciate the fact that we have a melting pot of cultures around us to learn from and really see things through a different perspective. But our historical role of immigration in the U.S. is really, we've had legal immigration, we've had illegal immigration, and both those have kind of attributed to our populations. This is just showing you some different things. This is just showing immigration, legal immigration. This is just the ones we know about that we've legalized and we've documented from 1820 all the way to 2003. So back in the day, we weren't super hot as a country, but eventually we got big, especially during the Industrial Revolution in this region. We had lots of new people coming in to better their lives. And in 1907 and 1914, we had new laws restricting immigration, so obviously our numbers dropped tremendously. The Great Depression, obviously no one wants to be here when we're not doing well as far as economy-wise. So a lot of people left and fled the United States. And eventually we slowly increased. This is a huge spike around the 1990s, because back then, this is what happened. The reason why we had this big spike is that we said that, okay, we will allow you to be a United States citizen if you can somehow prove, either by job or whatever, that you've been living in the United States for more than so many years. And so then we legalized them, and that's what really jumped this up as far as America, because we're looking at legal immigration in the United States. All right, I think that concludes 6.2, so we'll see you next time.